Time to say a very good morning to Mr. Neil Oliver. Neil, how are you doing?
I'm fine, Mike. I just think you might have made me sound a bit like a megalomaniac there when I wrote the world was revolving around me.
Yes, I hadn't really thought of that actually.
Yeah. It was more about I felt politically I was never particularly interested in politics,
yes.
and I certainly haven't moved, but somehow or other I've ended up on the far right.
Well, I mean, haven't we all? But that's not your words though. These are other people's words.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I'm where I always was, which was somewhere sort of vaguely in the middle.
Yes. Well, I prefer to think of
vaguely disinterested centrist, but I've suddenly become characterised as as far right extreme.
Yes. No, I prefer to think of you as very firmly placed in the land of common sense, which is where we should all be.
Yes, my views over the years have always been moderate, verging on the disinterested, really. I've always just wanted to be left alone. I've never been particular. I've never wanted an ideology to live by. I've never really looked for any political parties or any movement to give me the roadmap, to use an objectionable term, to my life.
Yes.
I've just quietly got on with things. I'm not interested in government. I've always wanted to be left alone by government, but somehow or other, by being like that, and I think more than anything else, because I have spoken out over the last 12 months about being very concerned about my own freedom, just to go about my life, just to go to the cinema and the shops and get on a plane when I want to. That has been compromised, and simply by being prepared or without really thinking too much about it, having spoken out and said, hold on a minute, I don't think that's fair.
Yeah.
Now it seems that demanding or insisting upon personal freedom is a sort of far-right quirk.
I know. It's unbelievable, isn't it? And also the way that the polarisation of society has kind of played out, in as much as, somehow all those people that seem to have FBPE in their header on Twitter want to keep lockdowns going, want to wear masks, tell me I'm dangerous and killing people for having done a show in a pub garden, And it seems to me that we're surrounded by these people. I mean, I'm like you. I always lived by PJ O'Rourke's kind of phrase, which was "Don't vote; it only encourages them." Because it's absolutely true. I don't wish to have politicians in my life. I don't wish to have them telling me what to do. When Boris comes out and says, "Oh, this has nothing to do with vaccinations; it's all to do with the lockdown," I know for a fact that there hasn't been a lockdown in many parts of this country.
Well, yes, I could definitely testify to the same events that you have. If the lockdown has leaked like a colander where I am, without a doubt, and obviously everything's shut. I mean, I would stress to everyone, listening up here in Scotland, we can't go to the pub yet, and that's not there yet for us, and everything's as locked down as it ever was. But having said that, people going about and meeting up and being in each other's company and whatever, I'm definitely seeing that all around me as you are. This change of tack that Boris Johnson made in the last day or two about it's not been about the vaccines, it's been about lockdown. I really don't understand, because I would have thought the single success that his regime has had is the vaccine program, and its unprecedented, unequal uptake, so to speak. And surely a remark like that at this time, when they're moving into the 40-somethings, could only tend to make people less inclined to go for the vaccine. When the big push has been and has successfully been about encouraging people to take a vaccine, why would you say, well, that's not what's worked anyway?
Well, exactly.
Doesn't that make people think, well, what's the point then? And really, they're telling us, without telling us, that but it's only by staying locked down that we keep the numbers down, which immediately makes me think, and probably makes a lot of other people think, well, surely that just means another lockdown is coming.
Well, exactly right, because if they somehow convince everyone that the only way to stop these things is to have lockdowns, even though the lockdown patently is not actually going on, because it isn't, it's as simple as that. People are flying into the country at a rate of thousands. Nobody knows where they're going, or even in some cases where they've actually been. We've got people visiting each other's houses. We've got people working in offices, according to those getting in touch with me today. And we've basically got all sorts of situations going on, which are the same as they were last year, except the only difference is the vaccine. So why wouldn't you say it's the vaccine?
I think you and I have I think we're agreed that we're holding conspiracy theories at arm's length. You know, you can feel conspiracy theories circling around you like vultures all the time, you know, ready to have a go. And you and I have both been fending them off and preferring to find simpler explanations for things based around, you know, incompetence and panic and, you know, and governmental inadequacies of one sort or another, rather than you know, even contemplating ascribing to these people the ability to, you know, have a big brother world. I wouldn't trust most of them to run a bath.
No, well, as they've clearly shown, whenever they've done most of the,
you have to begin to wonder at the extent to which is it fear. I mean, we know from the paperwork that's out there in the public domain that Sage and others were urging the government to frighten the people. You know, that the people weren't frightened enough of the virus, and that these infomercials and that propaganda campaign that's been out there to frighten the living daylights out of everybody about the threat to themselves and to other people has definitely worked. And as more and more time goes on, I genuinely wonder how you get people unfrightened.
Yes. Well, you know what it's worked on.
Some people are so comprehensively terrified. Yeah. I don't know how you wind that back in.
No, but I think the problem from that perspective, Neil, is that some people have become terrified and a lot of people haven't. And a lot of the people that haven't become terrified are the people that can't afford to be terrified, the people who have to go out to work, the people who can't be forced to stay home, people who do jobs which require them to be in a particular place. Like we spoke to a plumber yesterday. You know, we speak to cab drivers, we speak to van drivers, you know, people who work in supermarkets. They can't work from home. It's a kind of coincidence to me that all of the people who are terrified seem to be the ones that work from home.
Yes, I come from a self-employed background. I've mostly, with a few years exception, I've always been self-employed, and my dad, for most of my life growing up, was similarly perilously self-employed, although he did something else entirely, you know, to bring in money. But if you haven't lived with and really experienced fear of having no money, that's something to be scared of. Yeah. You know, and like you say, compared to going out and possibly catching a virus, which is, you know, 99% survivable. Yeah. Threat to losing your income, losing your home, being unable to feed your family. That really, without exception, if you're a family man or woman, that's the most terrifying prospect. Yeah. It's losing all of that. And when you bring into, well, if you go out, you might become ill or make somebody else ill. That is definitely on a lower rung of concern for most people.
Yes. And also the manifestation of this kind of idea of COVID passports is also a part of that. You know, the people who are saying things like, oh, I want to know that when I go to a restaurant or if I get on a train or if I sit in a bar, that the people around me are all healthy. Well, I'm sorry. Just because they don't have COVID doesn't mean they're healthy. They could have all manner of other terrible germs they could pass on to you, you know, and you could end up becoming very ill as a result of being in their sort of range. But the point is that we live as humans with that risk all the time. And we have a certain immunity to certain diseases. And just because we've been vaccinated for COVID does not mean that you're then safe against everything else.
Well, the government's own you know, the leaflets that are floating about already say fairly bluntly that the vaccine doesn't necessarily stop you contracting COVID and doesn't necessarily stop you transmitting it. No, I mean that's there in black and white in the information that comes. You know, so that's clearly the government are freely saying that they can't be sure about that. The thing another bit of footage in amongst the maelstrom. Edwina Curry, who was filmed saying that she didn't want unvaccinated people anywhere near her in the theatre queue or standing beside her at the theatre bar or being on a train with her. Yes. Amongst my many jaw-on-chest responses to that, well, who's serving you in the theatre bar? You know, who are you getting your gin and tonic and your champagne from? Yes. And the actors on stage... you know, she quoted a figure of 15 million pensioners in Britain who all want to get out there with their itchy feet and get on with their lives. Well, you'd have to have an outside world staffed by pensioners. Yeah. And only pensioners on stage in the theatre shows that she wants to go and see. Right. You know, how is she or anyone else going to distance herself successfully from the unvaccinated.
Right.
You'd have to. She'll have to move in a world of the over 75s.
Yeah, either that or a hazmat suit may be required for her if she wants to go out, and she can wear one of those. But it's amazing how many people like her want to infringe upon your personal rights and upon my personal rights by demanding that you do something in order to be near them. Personally, I've got no wish to be anywhere near Edwina Currie. I'd be more than happy to be warned of her every appearance wherever she's going so that I can't go there.
Fear, full stop, that 4-letter word, is the most pernicious element in life. Whatever it is that you happen to be fearful about, fear is the most corrosive, disabling, petrifying element that can enter your life. And we've already got a large number of people, a good chunk of the population, maybe more than half, who knows, who are properly frightened about life itself. And testimony like that from Edwina Currie that just ramps it up and moves us closer to believing that some people among us, neighbours, friends, relatives, or whoever, the people that you pass casually, are to be regarded as unclean and something to be frightened of.
Yeah.
That way dark days lie. If you follow that road where a group of people are demonized because of their very physical being, their very presence is to be regarded as something that's to be, avoided, that you're to be frightened of. That is the road to dark days.
Oh, it totally is.
The government have to, Boris Johnson or whoever, the powers that be, the authorities, those that speak up, some of them have to start advocating some kind of return to happiness. Happiness is an antidote to fear.
It really is.
Confidence is an antidote to fear. And the people that are frightened enough, and we all appreciate why steps were taken, or we think we understand why steps were taken to enforce the lockdown, and that fear was used as a very effective lever to keep people where they were supposed to be. But the time must surely be coming where people have to stand up and say that there are reasons to be happy, that that life is there to be lived, opportunities are there to be taken, and we've all got this country and the population within this country, we've got the rest of our lives to get on with. And never mind me, my kids, everybody else's kids. I mean, I thought that as well about Edwina Currie's statement. The young people, whatever you regard as young people, who've sacrificed a year of their lives for, in the main, the older part of the population. We've known from almost the beginning that those most at risk were at life expectancy age anyway. And that huge sacrifice has been there. And I've spoken before about the religiosity about all of this. And so there's even an element of child sacrifice about all of this.
Yeah.
As a population, we've been asked to sacrifice our children, not in the literal sense, but in terms of their education, their mental well-being. Everything about being a child or being an adolescent or a teenager has been sacrificed on the altar of COVID-19. And, enough of that has been done. And we have to get on with the rest of it. And someone out there's got to start making the people happy again.
Yeah.
I want to live in a happy country. I want to live in a happy, free society where people freely mix with one another, and that there aren't elements out there saying that there are groups who, because of personal choices they have made, are to be regarded as pariah, unclean, and to be shunned.
Yes. Well, this is the thing, I mean, I saw it with my own eyes on Monday when we were in the pub, and I was in a restaurant. The people's faces had changed. They weren't any longer trudging along the street with a mask on, looking downwards and not really catching anybody's eye. They were looking at each other, they were talking to each other, they were laughing, they were smiling, they were joking, and some of them were even hugging each other, heaven forbid, And it was great. Absolutely great, because it's what humans should be doing. And you forget that because we haven't done much of it, supposedly, although I believe a lot of people have been doing a bit of it, you forget how actually joyous it is to be with other people, and just to be even with people you don't know, in a big room outside under a roof of some kind with no walls or whatever it is. And it's absolutely brilliant. You talk about the Polynesian mariners. When I was referencing earlier about the world sort of revolving around them, which I thought was an intriguing thing, that they thought their ships didn't move and that the cosmos moved around them, which is kind of an interesting idea. But now I get the sense that Nicola Sturgeon and Boris Johnson both are desperately looking around for reasons not to get back to normal.
I think, well, we've discussed this previously. I think that there's a terror on the part of the powers that be at letting people back out and seeing the enormity of what's happened. You know, in all the disaster movies, you know, eventually when the survivors come, you know, blinking and, you know, and hollow out into the aftermath and have to start rebuilding. I genuinely think that for governments here and abroad, they've got a tiger by the tail. I think in some ways it's a bit like, I mean, I've got things to do this week and next week. I've got places to go because things are starting to kick back in. Yeah. I can feel a trepidation about going anywhere, about doing anything, because I have become to some extent institutionalized by the last 12 months. And that's why great thought has got to be put into getting people back out there. And as you say, I mean, I watched some of your live stream from the pub, and it was great just seeing it felt ridiculous to be finding it so uplifting to be seeing people doing something as sitting around a pub table, you know, with your coats and scarves on. And then I looked online and people were tweeting photographs of themselves sat outside pubs in London and elsewhere, you know, and it was great to see, because, you know, the togetherness and community is the antidote to fear.
It is. But it feels like you're in. But sometimes
they need each other.
Yeah, it sometimes feels a bit like you're in some kind of resistance movement, you know.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. You know, it's like the evil empire in the Star Wars movies and the Rebel Alliance, and like you said, I've this thing about me feeling that I have stood still while everything else has shifted, so that it's not me that's in a different place; it's everybody else. Right. You know, that's the sensation that I have had. And I've found myself, you know, casting around all over and making connections with people that hitherto I would never have dreamed of being in contact with. Right. But they've kind of emerged as other people who seem to have the same bemused expression on their faces that I recognise on my own. And you kind of cozy up to them online or literally. Yes. And establish that you share the same opinion. And it's like holding on to something that floats in the middle of the ocean or a shipwreck. You think, oh God, yeah, we can, if we stay together, we might stay afloat. And it just seems extraordinary to me. If you'd said to me 12 months ago or 2 years ago, the sort of things that I would be finding relief about, I would have thought that was just unbelievable, because it does feel that without the meteor striking or without the aliens invading, it very much feels as if we're living through some kind of disaster movie, and it's made somehow all the more frightening because you can't actually see anything. No, you know, there aren't any aliens, and there hasn't actually been a meteor strike, and somehow the atmosphere is all the more frightening because of it.
Well, I said this earlier in the show in the first hour that, you know, when I funnily enough, I came out of the pub to go and take my son back to get on a train. And outside of London Bridge Station, there's a testing centre now, which they've set up, a mobile testing centre, which actually has a sign that says asymptomatic testing centre. And I thought, this is like some kind of comedy now, that we're now testing people who haven't got any symptoms of anything to see whether they've got something that we think has gone away.
Well, yeah, as other people have said, you know, what kind of disease is it if you can only prove it's there by having a test for it?
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I mean, you know, it's bonkers.
I felt that from the beginning. You said, I mean, I saw that same thing about the ONS figures showing that whatever it is, 23% of those who had previously been casually described as COVID deaths aren't. You know, they died at the same time of something else. And of course, there's also the thing that 130,000 figure straddles 2 years. I think I'm right in saying that.
Yes, it does.
Starting to lump 2 years together rather than one. And so you know those figures have only ever been frightening, and it's always a big number to read. But again, it's just been another element for people to be, you know, vaguely terrified of. But you're not actually. I haven't seen any of it directly. This asymptomatic testing and the fact that I've heard about people getting positive tests. Yeah. I haven't personally known anyone who has, thank God, you know, died of COVID-19. Right. I just haven't.
Well, my theory, and I mean, I haven't.
It's happening out there.
Yeah. No, I mean, listen, I know people that have had it. I certainly know a few people who have died from it. You know, like in my sort of extended a list of acquaintances and that kind of thing. And a lot of my journalistic colleagues who are older than me that I started off with back when I was in my 20s, they're now in their 70s and 80s. And so many of them have got quite sick with it. But, I mean, my theory about the asymptomatic business has always been, if you haven't got any symptoms and you're not sick, and you don't really pass, well, we don't know whether you pass it to anybody else, but the test says that you've got it. Maybe the test is wrong. Maybe you haven't got it.
Well, there's always been the thing about the false positives, hasn't there?
Yeah.
I mean, there is to stray into that territory of stuff that I just don't feel confident about anymore. I've read so many numbers and I've read so many reports on one side or the other of the argument that I'm pulling away from COVID, and I want to concentrate myself. I'm paying attention to everything else. I had occasion, because of a little bit of work, I had to go through from Stirling to Glasgow on Monday of this week. I went through on the train, and it was bizarre. I mean, the train from Stirling to Glasgow is normally busy, and I was the only person on the train that I saw on a 4-carriage train. And then into Glasgow itself, I counted 8 people, apart from myself, passengers in the concourse of Queen Street Station in Glasgow. That is a major hub, not in world terms, but normally I know what it normally looks like. And then I had to walk the length of, I walked from Queen Street up West Regent Street through Blythewood Square to get to where I was going. And it was weird. It's the only word I can use. It was post-apocalyptic. There were vans around, obviously other people doing a bit of work, delivering something, collecting something. There was a sense that there were people in some of the offices, but the rest of it looked like sometimes when you walk upon a city where a bit of it's been cleared so that they can film a Tom Cruise, a movie. It had that feel about it, as though somehow the people had been hidden somehow, that they must be behind barriers somewhere. And I walked, it was a 20-minute walk each way. And for the length of it, I thought, how on earth is this going to come back?
I know.
Because I was walking past boarded up pubs, properly boarded up, like gone for good, boarded up delis, boarded up cafes. And I thought, what kind of, labour of Sisyphus is it going to be to get this back, get this boulder moving again?
Yeah. No, I think, listen, you're absolutely right. Neil, we could talk forever, but unfortunately we're out of time. I've got a funny story about Queen Street to tell you. Remind me next time. I'll tell you about that. It was about getting on the wrong train. Neil Oliver, a man after my own heart.